Gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining us. This is another edition of Financial Markets. My name is Anthony, and you're very welcome. Well, the show is proudly brought to you by Altex East Africa. And with Altex East Africa, we're saying you can do something new. Under Zabu, you can buy and sell treasury bonds across East Africa. Now, Altex is saying you can do something new with increased accessibility and affordability of treasury bonds. With as little as 15,000 shillings, you can trade on some of the biggest fixed income securities in East Africa. Altex East Africa is saying simply grab your phone and dial *292# and follow the prompts for you to be able to be part of the magic at Altex East Africa. Altex is also saying you can buy shares now at Safaricom. Safaricom was able to list on Altex East Africa Stock Exchange, and you can now buy yourself shares from one of the biggest telecommunications company within East Africa. Altex opens their markets at exactly 8 a.m. and closes at 3 p.m. East African Standard Time. Altex East Africa doing something new. Let's delve into the business of the stock exchange in Uganda for the 16th of August on Wednesday. Well, yesterday, the day was marked with a trade of 32 million shares, 32 million Ugandan shillings and over 512,000 Ugandan shares. When you look at this particular day of trade, comparing with Tuesday, the data showed a slight improvement in performance. 6% was the increase in the volume and 20% decline in the turnover was registered. Currently, the Uganda Stock Exchange has a turnover or a market capitalization of 17.1 trillion. In aggregate, 5 listings participated in trade on the Uganda Stock Exchange, ending the day with 4 gainers and 5 losers on the market. NIC, or National Insurance Company, led the gainers with a 5.26% appreciation in price after closing the day at 6.0 Ugandan shillings per share. MTN Uganda also appreciated by 0.58% and appreciated to 170.98 Ugandan shillings, whereas Equity Bank Limited appreciated by 0.12%. And that was closing off at 170.98 Ugandan shillings. MTN Uganda is trying to pull up its socks on the exchange currently, looking at the figures here. And marked by the gains yesterday, there's a lot of hope for the stock to return to gains sooner than later in the third quarter of 2023. The stock began the year with the price of 180 Ugandan shillings and currently is counting at least quite a number of losses on the year-to-date performance after losing close to 5.01% down to 170.89 Ugandan shillings per share just yesterday from 180 Ugandan shillings. MTN Uganda also in form of year-on-year performance is counting losses of at least 8.79%. However, in the shorter run, MTN has performed quite better with a 3-month gain of over 3.62% and a 4-week gain of 0.58%. MTN Uganda has also been one of the most traded on stocks and is in the 3rd position in as far as the traders on the Uganda Securities Exchange are concerned, the trading via volume. Over the past 3 months, from the 15th of May to the 16th of August, MTN has recorded a total volume of at least 34.6 million shares valued at 5.8 billion Ugandan shillings over the period, with an average of about 548,675. That is on average what the MTN company trades per trading station. A volume high of just about 12.6 million is what MTN has recorded as their highest volume in the last quarter. And this was on the 27th of June 2023. Well, news coming from the exchange shows that Airtel Uganda will very soon be joining MTN Uganda on the exchange. Now it has been, of course, amended in the Uganda Communications Commission Act 2020, amended that every telecommunication company is required to list at least 20% of their shares on the Uganda Stock Exchange. Consequent of that particular amendment in the Act, Airtel Uganda was required to release last year, but due to what they called unfriendly market conditions, they said they were not going to list due to fears of being undersubscribed to, like MTN was back in 2021, and therefore they requested for a postponement of their listing, and this will not probably exceed this year in December. We are expecting Airtel to be able to list on the exchange, and you should be warming up for some of those shares on the initial public offer. You know, it's always an honor to be the first to buy. So if you want to be the first to buy shares at Airtel, warm up, because they are just around the corner. You can be one of the very first investors at Airtel, and that is also a good thing for the industry, the telecommunication industry. Will have a little bit more leverage on, the profits that are made from some of these companies, and especially due to the fact that most of them are foreign companies owned by foreign farms, and originally they're not Ugandan. So whenever we have this capital flight, sometimes it's painful, but when a company is listed on the exchange, you're sure at least we'll be taking part of that profit. If at all you have quite a number of local investors as well jumping on that stock. Away from MTN Uganda, when you look at, first of all, MTN, by the way, was also one of the biggest traders yesterday. MTN traded close to about, 159,000 shares, close to 160,000 shares, which was the second biggest volume, just coming behind Bank of Baroda at 164,000 Ugandan shillings. So that shows you pretty much that MTN is still a favorite of many on the exchange. So there's a lot more to look out for from this particular one. But away from MTN Uganda, we still had Equity Bank Limited. Equity Bank Limited at 0.12% gain, up to closing to about 1,060.27 Ugandan shillings, whereas Kenya Airways added 0.11%, up to 99.08 Ugandan shillings per share. On the losing side, mainly we had cross listings like Nation Media Group, KCB, Centum, Jubilee Holdings, and East African Breweries Limited, with Nation Media Group coming at the bottom at a 1.61% depreciation in price, and KCB at a 1.27% depreciation in price. Centum lost 1.18%, whereas the Jubilee Holdings Limited stock lost 0.19%, and the East African Breweries lost at least 0.61%. Bank of Baroda had the biggest amount of shares traded at close to 164,820 shares that were recorded. The price closed off stably at least 15.0 Ugandan shillings without a slight change on the pricing. And currently Bank of Baroda's market capitalization is at 37.5 billion, which represents about 0.219% of the entire Uganda Securities Exchange equity market. Now, in as far as the bonus shares are concerned, Bank of Baroda Uganda on the 7th of June 2023 listed extra 12.5 billion shares in a bid to collect capital of close to 125 billion in order to meet the new minimum capital requirements as set by the Bank of Uganda for all commercial banks, with the stake raised from 25 billion to a threshold of now 150 billion. Well, Bank of Baroda is not alone. Quite a number of banks are trying out several means of raising capital through private equity or public equity. And Bank of Baroda shows this path of public equity, which is one of the advantages of being a listed company. And this is to encourage businesses. If you are out there and you're doing a business, you should be thinking about listing, because some of the reasons why companies list is these. For example, a directive comes up and the minimum capital requirements have been tightened to your own disadvantage because you don't have that money at the moment and your clients don't have that money to raise for you. No one is going to raise for you that money. But for companies that are listed, they always have an option to list extra shares. They have an option to go back to the public to request for more funds. After all, that's what the capital market is all about, raising that capital. So you think about it. If you are owning a business, you better think about how you get that business public. That is one of the best ways to raise funds in the 21st century. Well, Bank of Baroda Uganda is currently trading shares at 15 Ugandan shillings. Remember, the bonus shares came at 10 Ugandan shillings. These bonus shares were tailored mainly only to the shareholders currently that were currently holding shares at the Bank of Baroda Uganda stock. The price fell slightly from 85 to 75, then later drastically from 75 to 10 Ugandan shillings after the announcement of the bonus shares by Bank of Baroda Uganda. But the stock is regaining and has been on and off for quite a number of days, with gains of up to 17 shillings, with gains up to 17, then down to 15 as we can currently see the stock. In as far as trading is concerned, Bank of Baroda has also raised their participation in trade, and now in the last one quarter, the company is the second most traded on stock on the Uganda Securities Exchange, with a total volume of 88 million shares valued at 1.32 billion traded over the period at an average of about 1.4 million per trading session. A volume high that was achieved on the 24th of July was 21.7 million shares. That's it from Bank of Baroda Uganda. Uganda Clays Limited was also another participant in trade, trading close to 40,681 shares, whereas the Stanbic Bank Uganda stock at least had 60,993 shares traded, and MTN Uganda at 159,608, whereas National Insurance Corporation was at 86,817. That's it from the companies that traded on the Uganda Stock Exchange yesterday. But in summary, regarding the performance of the indices give us a bigger picture. And when you look at the USE All-Share Index, it slightly declined, of course, pulled down by losers, mainly from the cross-listed stocks. The USE All-Share Index lost at least 1.39 points and was down to close to about 995.91 points. This is at least one of the very first times we are seeing the benchmark index cross the 1,000 mark, down to now 995. The Uganda Securities Exchange has been facing challenges, especially with the participation being very low from the local investors and inflation biting on the investors' pockets as well. That and a couple of other factors have been some of the reasons why the performance has seemingly been crippled on the Uganda Stock Exchange. The USE Local Company Index, on the other hand, which tracks the aggregate performance of the 10 domestic stocks, currently increased by 0.31%, showing a slight improvement in the performance of the local stocks, making it a one-week gain of about 0.31% and a four-week loss of about 0.14%. That's it from the Uganda Securities Exchange. Well, some news coming in from Bank of Uganda. We stick to Uganda before we move to Nairobi. It shows that for the first time, the Bank of Uganda has reduced the central bank rate over about a year. The Bank of Uganda, for the first time last week, in more than a year or so, reduced the bank rate by 0.5%. The reduction by Bank of Uganda comes on the back of a deceleration in the inflationary pressures amid growing concerns and need to support economic growth. Over the last 12 months, the Central Bank of Uganda has administered a tight monetary policy to control inflation, but on the other hand, it has also impacted the economic growth and slowed credit uptake. Every time we have the central bank rate raising rates, there is a ripple effect that comes into the credit market. In the credit market, we are really talking about people who are borrowing money from banks. Because commercial banks don't own money, commercial banks mainly get money from the Bank of Uganda at specific rates. And this rate is the central bank rate, of which the banks get money, and then the banks lend money at their own rates, where we have about 18 to 20% now in the rates that we have currently. And then they take off the 8%, and then they give back the 10% to central bank. That's how it really works. So every time the central bank raises the rates, definitely the commercial banks have to push back to the clients or to the customers. And this is what has been happening, crowding out the private sector from borrowing money. Now, Bank of Uganda last week indicated that the central bank rate, which is a key measure of controlling inflation, had been reduced to 9.5% from 10%, noting that this would catalyze economic growth of between 5 to 6%. The central bank rate had been increased to 10% in June and had been maintained at the same rate as inflationary pressures were ravaging the economy. The central bank also reduced the cash reserve requirement by 50 basis points to 9.5%, which is expected to release more cash in the financial markets. That means the banks are going to release more cash, more borrowing, less interest rates, lower interest rates rather, and better economy, according to the central bank. Presenting the monetary policy statement in Kampala, the Bank of Uganda Deputy Governor Dr. Michael Etingi said that there were still risks despite improvements in near-term inflation projections compared to June 2023. One of the concerns has been this week about World Bank's withdrawal of new loans or new loan disbursements to Uganda following the signing of the Anti-Homosexuality Act by the President of Uganda, His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. That and more has been one of the things that have been pushing the inflation, pushing the prices of things upwards, because now we have a tighter spot to be able to fund our budget, to be able to finance projects that World Bank before has been taking over. And that is what currently is worrying some of the investors and other funders for Ugandan government business. That and more is also what has been looming on the side of the central bank. However, now the central bank rate has reduced to 9.5%. We don't know if this will continue the trend of reduction, but well, that depends on the performance of the economy and inflation, as well as we can see already on the market. Well, let's have a look at the Nairobi Securities Exchange briefly, as per what they had for trade on Wednesday. On Wednesday, the Nairobi Securities Exchange had 43 listings participating in trade, and the day ended with 12 gainers and 25 losers. Home Africa Management led the gainers with a 9.68% appreciation in price, up to at least close to 0.3 Kenyan shillings per share. Also, the TPS East African Serena added 9.09%, whereas Unga Group added 5.88%. Crown Paints Kenya added 5% on their value. On the losing side, Ever Ready East Africa came out last with an end-of-day depreciation of 6.5%, and this was down to 1.15 Kenyan shillings per share. whereas the Safaricom stock lost 5.66%, and Uchumi Supermarkets lost about 5.26%, whereas Williamson Tea Kenya lost 4.43%. Safaricom recorded the highest volume at over 31 million shares recorded. Safaricom seems to be returning much more resilient this year, and we hope definitely the gain will be sustained. Altex East Africa has also been able to list Safaricom stocks, and you can now find them on Altex as well. East African Breweries Limited recorded the second highest volume at 1.96 million. This, by the way, is one of their highest volumes this year. Nation Media Group at least added 1.5 million shares. Equity Group Holdings at least 523,500 shares. Regarding the performance of the all-share index, the all-share index on the Nairobi Securities Exchange plummeted by 2.75 points and closed off at 100.02 points. That's the status quo of the Nairobi Securities Exchange. Things in East Africa are getting a little bit tighter following the weakening of the shilling in Uganda and in Kenya as well, but also tighter, policies from abroad in as far as funding is concerned. That and more is what is currently influencing the performance of these particular markets here within East Africa. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in to Smart 24 TV. My name is Anthony and I'm your host. Remember to catch us live every single Monday to Friday, every single day of the week, as we unfold some of the latest business data. The show is proudly brought to you by Altex East Africa. And with Altex, you can buy and sell treasury bonds at your convenience by simply dialing *292#. Altex East Africa, you can do something new. And there you have it. Have a very beautiful day. Bye. See you tomorrow.
No data, no problem. Zabu allows you to buy or sell securities on the Altex exchange from anywhere in Uganda via USSD. Step 1. To buy, dial *292#. Step 2. Select buy. Step 3. Select the product you would like to buy. For example, bonds. Step 4. Select your preferred maturity year. Step 5. Select the bond you would like to buy. Step 6. Input an amount of 15,000 Ugandan shillings or more. Step 7. Your order has been forwarded for processing. And finally, Step 8. Your order has been confirmed.